from the studios of Clean Fuels Alliance America, this is the Better, Cleaner, Now podcast. Authentic conversations with leaders in the biodiesel, renewable diesel, and sustainable aviation fuel industries. Now, here's your host, Scott Tremaine.
And welcome. This week, a soy spotlight on Tennessee, with Clean Fuels Director of Outreach and Development, Tom Verry, and Stefan Maupin, the Executive Director of the Tennessee Soybean Promotion Council.
Thanks, Scott. Stefan, it's great to have you with us this week, and thank you for taking the time to join me today.
Thank you, Tom. Glad to be a part of this.
Well, we're here today. We're doing the Soy Spotlight, where we feature our soy stakeholders that we get to learn more about what's going on in the soybean industry and the soybean industry here in the state of Tennessee. Great to be here. Tennessee Soybeans, one of our founding members of this industry, David Womack. Mr. Womack was one of the original founding fathers of the industry. So super glad to be here. When we first start off, Stefan, tell us a little bit about yourself, how long you've been here, where'd you come from?
Yeah. Well, Tom, glad to be here at Tennessee Soybean. It's been a fantastic couple of years. Yes, in July, celebrated 2 years being on board here as the new executive director. I've stepped in after a fantastic individual, Parks Wells, retired as the executive director. And, boy, he had the table set for me to come in. So I can't say enough about the leadership of Tennessee Soybean and the staff here, how fantastic they have been. Prior to that, I worked for Tennessee Farm Bureau Federation for 27 years. I worked in the public policy division that entire time, and the last several years I was director of the public policy division. And in that division, we were responsible for the commodity work of the organization, which meant we worked closely with Tennessee Soybean as well as other commodity organizations in the state. Our primary responsibilities were for policy development as well as all of the government relations work the organization did. So I was responsible for all of our regulatory work, both on the state and federal level, as well as working with our congressional delegation, the state legislature, as well as the executive branch. And, Tom, a few times we had to deal with the judicial branch. And unfortunately, we're seeing more and more times that agriculture finds itself in the courtroom protecting itself.
Oh, that I totally see that and understand it. And, well, that's a great opening, Stefan. And number one, Parks, yeah, absolutely a legend in soybean world, biodiesel world. I've known Parks and his wife Janice for over 30 years now. I consider him a good friend. And, it's neat that you've come on and you're going to build on what Parks and the Tennessee Soybean Board has done in the previous years. And I think with your skill set, for the listeners, I do have some familiarity with Farm Bureau, the state farm bureaus around the country. And it is well known Tennessee Farm Bureau is the premier state farm bureau organization in the country. That's what I've heard. I'm sure Yeah,
well, I would agree with that too.
I know you would, but I have heard that from other third parties.
By membership, it is the largest state Farm Bureau organization in the country with a very rich heritage that goes back over 100 years. So,
and your position there as head of public policy on federal and state, is that correct?
That is correct.
Yeah, well, I've been with you in Washington, D.C. on Hill visits, and everybody knows Stefan Maupin. When we come in to a congressperson's office in D.C., it's like, hey, Stefan, I was at, that was so, saw you at the field day, or I'll see you at the, so-and-so farm here in a little bit. So it is, we appreciate you being part of the biodiesel Clean Fuels family now.
Well, Tom, even politics is all about relationships, right? And so the voice of any industry or any organization speaking to their elected officials is extremely important. And so fortunate enough to have those relationships and be the mouthpiece for the farmers in Tennessee. And I'm enjoying still doing the same thing for Tennessee soybean producers specifically.
Fantastic. I know you're going to do a great job, doing a great job. Are you originally from West Tennessee? Did you grow up on a farm?
I did. I'm originally from the Dyer County area of Tennessee, which is in northwest Tennessee.
Is that where Reelfoot's at?
It's very close to Reelfoot Lake. Absolutely.
If you want some good crappie fishing, that's a place to go.
It is. It is some of the best. It's one of the, I consider, wonders of the world, created at the earthquake of 1812. And so a lot of heritage in that area, but an extremely agrarian area. And so those economies up in that direction, Tom, are literally fueled by agriculture. It is the foundation of those local economies. And some of those counties up there are distressed counties that we consider here in Tennessee from a rural development standpoint. And so we came from that area. I should go back to the original question. Came from that area. My family farmed, several generations of farmers, and my brother still farms there today, around 3,500 acres. Several other family members farm and row crop there. So it's part of the family. It's part of what we do, part of what we've always done, and proud to have that background. I'll finish with this. My intention was to farm when I graduated school. Matter of fact, my dad and I had just bought a combine, and I had the transmission out of it. And I got the job offer from Tennessee Farm Bureau, and I said, well, I'll do that a couple of years and then go back to the farm. And it took me 27 years to get back to West Tennessee, but in a little different capacity.
Oh, that's very interesting. I mean, that's the county that butts up to Missouri Boot Hill, right?
That is correct. We're just right across the river.
Well, I remember I was at Missouri Soybean. We'd go down to the Boot Hill, and sometimes we'd slip across the state line and go to a great catfish place there in the Blue Hole, or
Blue Bank.
Blue Bank, that's
Blue
it.
Bank,
oh man,
absolutely.
the best catfish bar none.
Yeah,
so,
they're the catfish restaurants in the Lake County area are known nationally, and if you ever want a good place just to have a vacation, a good fishing trip, or mainly to duck hunt in the wintertime, come to Lake County, Reelfoot Lake area, have a good meal.
Well, yeah, I've heard the duck hunters talk about hunting Reelfoot Lake, and that's when are you a duck hunter?
I am a duck hunter, and people ask me, friends of mine from my old life ask me, how do you like the move? Or why did you move? My answer is I can wake up out of my bed and in 20 minutes be in a duck blind on the Fork of Deer River or in a duck blind on the Obion River. And that's usually all I have to say to my buddies for them to understand that the duck hunting recreation in the wintertime is definitely worth the move.
If you don't know about duck hunters, here's my opinion. They love cold, wet, dreary mornings in the fall.
That is correct.
They like the cold fronts and pushes the ducks down or something. So... Well, your farm, how's the crop look on your farm back in Dyer County?
Yeah, well, in the western region of the state, which is primarily where most of our grain production takes place, as well as some cotton production, it was a very unfavorable planting season with a lot of rain. We got through that. Most of them planted their crop or replanted it. And thus far, the crops look really good. They're doing well. The soybeans, I believe, are going to yield very well. I don't know if they will break records, but I think everyone is going to be comfortable with their crop. In the middle region of the state, moving over into the eastern region, especially southern Middle Tennessee, they've had extremely, actually devastating drought conditions. And so with their corn crop, some of them will not even have a corn crop, or the yield will be cut in half depending on where you fall within that drought map. And the soybean acreage has been hurt really bad too. So the guys in those parts of the state, they're going to be suffering from a lower price, but also a much more reduced yield. So our prayers go out to them for this year. But the ones I've talked to are resilient, and they're always visionary, and they say they will do their best to survive this year, and looking forward to trying it again next year. And so what an attitude.
Wow. I wasn't aware Middle Tennessee was was in a drought. Timely rains, good rains. The WASDE report came out not too long ago showing a huge crop in the United States, so which is not good for prices, obviously.
Just
so,
an unusual phenomenon, that northern Alabama, northern Georgia area
right?
Into southern, middle, and east Tennessee have just really suffered from drought conditions in this growing season.
Well, that's very unfortunate to hear that. Yeah, definitely prayers for those farmers, and hope they can pull through. And one thing, I'm not a farm kid, but been around farmers for 30 years. Absolutely right, they're the most resilient bunch of people you can ever imagine. So, what as far as the Tennessee Soybean Board, what are the issues you're working on now?
Well, when I had the opportunity for Parks Wells to be here for approximately a year for us to make a transition. And so I was able to see the operations of Tennessee Soybeans along with the retiring executive director during that period of time. And that was an extremely important transition period. Parks and I had several conversations about where this organization and this entity has come to over the last 30 plus years. And so I'm just going to try to carry on what he has started, what he wanted to do, maybe carry out some of his visioning. And we're in a very good financial position as an entity right now. And I think that's important, and that's certainly a star in his crown, that we are in a good financial position to take on the next steps, Tom. So what's my visioning? What do I see for Tennessee Soybean? We will try to communicate more with consumers in the future. Now, we will continue to carry on a very robust research program with our land-grant universities here in Tennessee and other entities. On that front, our board has just voted to enhance our research program from a standpoint of its administration, to cast the net out farther on our request for proposal program. And so we will maintain a robust research program. We also, as I mentioned, want to increase our efforts to communicate with the consumer. And why is that important? We have a phenomenal opportunity nationwide to communicate with consumers, because I believe consumers are asking more about their food, fiber, and energy production, probably more so than they ever had in history. We talk about all the time that we're several generations removed from the farm, and that's a fact. We can't get away from it. But what I believe a phenomenon that nobody anticipated is those generations that were removed from the farm are now looking backwards and saying, hey, what's going on the farm? Now, what we have to do is we have to explain to the consumer, and I believe when you explain that to the consumer, then you also explain it to the decision makers in Congress or state legislatures or the city council. But we have to explain to them how their food and energy supply is being produced in a sustainable fashion, and we get better at it every year, and we're the best in the world, and that at the end of the day, they can depend on what we're producing here to take care of their needs, and that way they can spend their money on other wants, other needs that they may have. So we're going to try to enhance our efforts to carry that message to the consumer, and we're looking forward to it. We have contracted with a marketing agency here local that is doing a fantastic job for us. They have taken over our social media. We plan to work with other states. We plan to work with Clean Fuels Alliance and your communications department, and work with other states and the United Soybean Board, and quite frankly, other commodity organizations to build the message out there, circle the wagons, and communicate the right message to the consumer.
Well, that sounds very exciting, Stefan, and absolutely critical work. I know when we are working in new markets in our industry, that question comes up a whole bunch about using soybean oil for fuel, and we have to address that concern, and we rely on our our soybean farmer stakeholders to do that, and they do an excellent job explaining how we can grow food and fuel out there. And the soybean farmers here in Tennessee and across the United States have done such a good job. We can't eat all the soybean oil they produce. Soybean produces meal, 80% meal, 20% oil. The soybean oil goes in about everything you can imagine, and you can't eat it all. It's in everything. Right. And if we didn't have this market for biodiesel, I don't know, you couldn't grow with the size crop we have now. So we have to, we're going to rely on you. You guys tell your story better than anybody, how you can produce so many soybeans so efficiently and so environmentally responsible as well. Yeah, that'll be a great effort we want to work with you on.
Well, we would love to do that. You know, Tom, in my previous job, I was involved with our marketing communication efforts there, and had the opportunity to sit in on focus group sessions, to look over data from survey groups. And what we know is that the farmer has a very high level of credibility with the public, with the consumer. And we must use that because they do have a fantastic reputation. Why do they have the great reputation? Well, they're just down the street. They're just down the road. They're we were talking about hunting a while ago. It's that person you call up and say, I'd like to rent your farm, or could I go over there and hunt? They are local. The farmers are. And so they do have the best ability to carry that message. But it's very difficult with all the noise that is going on in the world today from a lot of different directions, and certainly what's happening in different parts of the world, what's carrying the news cycle, doesn't leave time for that. It's very hard to get that message across, but we're going to look for new ways. We have social media. We still have various venues of print, which is getting more difficult to understand how we can use that. But with print, you can communicate with different demographics, right? Different age groups. Then there's the potential for video work. And, you know, Tom, tomorrow there may be a new type of digital media venue that is created we know nothing about today. But what we have to be ready for is when that happens to have the message teed up and ready. And I will say at Clean Fuels, you all have done a phenomenal job of being ready to communicate the Clean Fuels message to the public and bridging the gap between the energy companies and the farmers out there. And so we look forward to that work in progress in the future.
You're listening to the Better, Cleaner, Now podcast.
I'm Tom Verry, and I'm speaking with Stefan Maupin with the Tennessee Soybean Promotion Council. So, Stefan, why don't you talk about how the council's relationship to clean fuels? It goes back from the very beginning, as we mentioned with David Womack, Tennessee Soybean Farmers, one of our founding members. And so it's been involved from the very beginning. And how are we working together now?
Yeah, well, from my standpoint, it is actually quite an honor to work with Clean Fuels, because in my previous job with Tennessee Farm Bureau, I worked real close with Mr. Womack. He was a leader in his local farm bureau, but also worked with several other strong leaders in Tennessee Soybean. And one of their, I guess you would say, one of their proud moments was the work towards biodiesel. And what that has become, some of them are no longer with us, but what that has become, I think they would be so proud today to know that they were a part of the Clean Fuels Alliance, what it has become, the membership expansion, and just the total mission that Clean Fuels has taken on. So from that standpoint, I'm glad to work with the organization. It has fantastic leadership. But I will say this, energy is complex. It always has been. If you look back throughout the history of providing energy in this country for whatever the use may be, but we're going to stick specifically to fuels, it's very complex. It sometimes can be very competitive. So we're going through an unusual time right now, and certainly we're glad to be a part of Clean Fuels and carrying that message. There's growing pains that I believe happen with any organization, but what a great time for the farmer to know that what they're producing is answering so many questions and challenges that the world has indicated they want solved at this point.
Well, very well put, Stefan. That's exactly right. I Mr. Womack, would go to St. Louis for those meetings, month after month, year after year. I mean, it was started back in 1992,
right?
And now we are the largest consumer of soybean oil in the country. Yeah. And that's only because of the farmer leadership that started this, and the soybean farmers in Tennessee and the United States are so good at growing soybeans. We have the oil to grow it.
Yeah.
And if you look at the demand for soybean oil in the food use, it's pretty flat or even going down. But if you see the graph for the demand for soybean oil for biodiesel, renewable diesel, it looks like a hockey stick. So it took a lot of vision for the farmer leaders back there, like Mr. Womack, to see that. I didn't see it. I was around. I was just a paid help guy driving a truck, soybean biodiesel truck around. But
it was the same way.
So it is amazing. So
Tom, what a beautiful story. What a wonderful story of just, I guess you would call it Americana, maybe, that you would have a farmer. And Mr. Womack, we'll use him as an example, is representative of hundreds of farmers over the decades who would get up, would maybe leave a list with a son or daughter or wife of things that had to be done, would pack a bag and go on a trip knowing that they were leaving behind things that needed to be done. They wouldn't get a dime for it, and in some situations did good to be reimbursed for their travel. But came to a location and shared their vision. And the only thing that they would really get back from it, hopefully, number one, would be a use for what they're producing on their farm. And then number two, the satisfaction of knowing that they contributed to a better world.
Yeah.
And what a wonderful, beautiful story of sacrifice on their part that they made, really for nothing in return. But again, that satisfaction of knowing they were a leader and that they had a vision and that they brought that vision to fruition, I think it's just absolutely fantastic to think about.
It absolutely is. And the farmer leadership that we made our industry and making Tennessee Soybean Promotion Council and Tennessee Farm Bureau going is amazing, and we don't recognize that enough or appreciate it. I think one of the neat things about biodiesel, we get to interact with a lot of other industries, and that'll be we had home heat dealers from the Northeast come to the Midwest, and something I didn't even think about. I got thinking after they said it, it's like they, after spending time with our farmer leaders, it's like we wish we would have this type of leadership for our industry.
Right.
And that is so true. I mean, yeah, they their life doesn't get easier for coming to these meetings. Their life gets harder. I'm sure they probably hear that when they leave the farm with the list, like you said, a list of chores for their husband, wife, partner, brother. I've heard those stories.
Yeah. Right.
So it is.
And you think about how many of them who, especially in today's time, they have maybe 50 or 60 different landowners that they rent land from. And that's their lifeblood of their farm operation. So they're not only farming their property, but they're farming property of so many other people. And they have to answer to them if something falls behind. They have to answer to those other landowners if something doesn't go right. Maybe something didn't get sprayed one day while they were in St. Louis, or they were in Washington, D.C., and was sprayed 3 days later and didn't get good weed control. They have to answer to people when that happens. And so it's not easy, but they believe in it. And I will say this. I am honored to be around so many farmers that in another life and in another world, I would rank them up there as far as business potential and business savvy, up there with people today that we would look at and compare to a Warren Buffett, or maybe others who have run very successful corporations. Those are gifted people, and they only come around every now and then. But we have a lot of farmers out there that have that same gift at business, that same gift at vision, who stayed on their farm and carried on a farm operation, and yet they were able to share some of that business savviness and vision with the rest of the country through, for example, Clean Fuels and other organizations in the soybean world and in the farm world.
Absolutely right. That's a great way to frame it. It does translate back to when we work with farmers to educate, if we happen to be in D.C. or we happen to be in Sacramento, California, or any spot in between. That is very true. And I think another aspect what the farmer leaders have brought to this industry that we don't recognize enough is the Clean Fuel Alliance were built with the farmer vision, which is, better than I do, they're third, fourth, fifth generation farmers. So they really they have a really long-term view, and they built this industry with that type of, we're not just looking for, a quick fix, a quick hit. We're looking to build an industry for the long term. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we live in a day and age where corporations come and go, but the farmer wants to stay on forever in some form or fashion. And that's extremely important. We don't see many industries like that have vision for that type of longevity.
No, we don't.
And so, but the biofuels area is part of that answer to continue on farming operations. And we can't forget, Tom, that we also have a very hungry world. And the fact that we're looking for opportunities in biofuels means that we can, from a marketplace standpoint, we can increase our yields and our capacity to produce food, while at the same time increase our capacity for energy. And everything is driven by the marketplace. And so if we increase that capacity and need for biofuels, especially in soybeans, at the same time, we have increased our production of protein that we can send around the world. And we still have a majority of the world that is hungry and is malnourished and needs the protein. And so we'll produce that protein, and it can go around the world. And at the same time, we can take the byproduct, being the oil, and we can use it in a form and fashion that accomplishes other important purposes. And so if that ever converges, what a story that will be for the ingenuity of the farmer and so many others involved for satisfying those needs around the world.
Oh, absolutely, Stefan. I mean, we've been in the industry a long time. I remember we had industry experts, quote unquote, saying if biodiesel ever got above 300 million gallon demand, it would ruin the soybean complex. It'd mess everything up. And now we're at 4.6 billion, probably heading to 5 billion. And the soybean farmers are producing for the food market, for the energy market, and it's getting cheaper for everybody. Just like you mentioned, you're producing protein with soy. So when you're using biodiesel, you're actually making the soy protein cheaper, which that means your chicken's cheaper, your milk's cheaper, right, your pork chop's cheaper.
Right. And you've opened up that ability to ship it into other places that may be more expensive and fit into the marketplace, while at the same point making it profitable for the farmer. But here's the one thing we must remember is that regardless of how positive what we've just been talking about sounds, there will be detractors. We know there will be someone on the other side. Tom, I learned in my other job in government relations, and I was a registered lobbyist and spent a lot of time on Capitol Hill, on our state level especially. I don't care what the issue was. There were always two sides.
Yeah.
I tell the story a lot that I sat down in a committee meeting and a representative had a bill that would change Tennessee law and allow people to own a pet skunk. Tennessee law prohibited anyone from owning a pet skunk, right? It's humorous. And the person sitting beside me was registered for an organization that was there to oppose that bill, and they were completely opposed to that bill passing and people in Tennessee being allowed to own pet skunks. And that is my favorite story to talk about. I don't care how benign something sounds. There's always somebody on the other side of the issue. Now, in clean fuels...
Oh, wait a minute. What happened to the bill?
It died.
So you cannot own pet skunks.
She was successful that I'm aware of. You cannot own a pet skunk in Tennessee. You can go back and fact check me on that. But that day, that bill died in committee because there was an organization opposed to that.
Great way to illustrate that.
Absolutely. In the clean fuels, the biofuels industry is no exception. There are those out there who want to take a different approach. And so advocacy from several different directions is extremely important as we talk to decision makers to get the story straight, to get the facts straight, to get the policy where it needs to be so that the people of the United States and around the world benefit from clean fuels, the farmers benefit from it, the processors and others in the industry can benefit. Otherwise, they will have a louder bullhorn, and the noise will get too loud. So it's just important that we're at the table.
Absolutely right. It's always this industry has been around actually 30 years and has been growing and growing, but it always there's always opposition to that, and it never seems to change. We get the food versus fuel issue a lot. We get land use sometimes. We get water use. We get we're not good enough on certain emissions, or you name it. They have concerns that have to be addressed. We've been able to successfully address, I think, most of those concerns because we generate data. We generate the key relationships. Most of that's paid for by our soybean farmer stakeholders.
Right.
And we got an issue right now in California. They want to put a cap on soy-based biodiesel because there are environmentalists out there. They don't want to incentivize production agriculture, and they don't want combustion. They don't want liquid fuels. They want electric vehicles, even for the heavy equipment, which doesn't really exist in any quantities and doesn't look like will be for 20 years. But it's just another example that we're going to be working to make sure we don't get a cap on soy-based biodiesel in California. We got 73% of the market now is renewable diesel and biodiesel in California, so it's almost too successful. It drew some attention. Yeah. You'd think, oh, that's great. We're like patting ourselves on the back, and it's like people in California is like, what is this? That's keeping us from the bright electric vehicle future. They think. I love electric vehicles. I've driven them. I think they're great, but I don't think they're ready for. There's a lot of applications they're just not ready yet, and won't be for decades.
They fit into the transportation picture and potentially the transportation policy for the United States, but the where they will be is at a much smaller level, just simply because the reality and quite honestly the physics of energy needs, right? And so thank goodness that the research and development and our capacity to produce biofuels with lower greenhouse gas emissions, with lower particulate matter emissions, and other types of emissions that are needed in certain parts of this country are there. And we have a plan, and there is the capacity to produce it. And as we've talked about before, that solution would not be there had we not had vision decades ago.
If David Womack wasn't there, leaving his farm, coming to the meetings, mostly in St. Louis, but they had that vision.
Tom, I will say this, and it's been one of my concerns just working in the agricultural industry for years, and I would say it hasn't happened yet. But we should always be cognizant of the fact that we can lose our vision And everyone's probably heard of the story that's been told many times. Helen Keller, who was blind and was deaf, but overcame that to be able to communicate and do great things, was asked one time by a young man, which was worse, losing and not having sight or not having hearing? And her response was, in the way in which she learned to communicate, the worst thing and her biggest fear was losing vision. So it wasn't the sight of her eyes that she feared losing, and it wasn't the sound of being able to hear that most concerned her. It was losing vision going forward.
Wow.
And we should all remember that we must ensure that we not stop today, that we always have visioning for what could happen in the future. And I would just implore everyone within the Clean Fuels Alliance sphere to remember, like we talked about before, some of the greatest visionaries exist within the farming community. And I am amazed every day, just about the time, Tom, I think I may be smart or know a little something, that I will talk to a farmer that will have ideas and ideas for solutions and well thought out plans well into the future that should be communicated to a much wider audience. And so that visioning is extremely important, and we just need to make sure that farmers are at the table moving forward throughout the process of pushing the biofuels message.
Absolutely. Without their farmer vision, we wouldn't have the industry here today.
Right.
So, hey, Stefan, I know you. Thank you for coming to our board meetings. They're held in Washington, D.C. What are your impressions? What do you learn at our board meetings?
Well, my impression is there's a lot of information and there's a lot of data, Tom, that is over my head. But to the ones in the room who work in the industry specifically, it is critical information. So I would say my impression was the information sharing in that meeting is very robust and it is very strong. So a lot of good information shared at the meeting, number one. Number two, you had the Secretary of Agriculture there, right? Yep. Does it get any better than that you had someone on the cabinet level of the highest office in the world come to the Clean Fuels board meeting to lay out his vision, to lay out what he thought, and then ask for feedback? And that doesn't happen every day. We're a large country, 50 states, hundreds of millions of people. And the Secretary of Agriculture was in that room to have roughly an hour-long conversation with the Clean Fuels Board. So the networking opportunities, and I believe the respect of the organization that was shown there at that board meeting was impressive. So that was number two. Number three, to see farmers in the room, and a great slate of farmer directors there, many of whom I've become great friends from other states, in the room with people and decision makers with large energy companies, logistic companies, is extremely important. And when you see that interaction in a room or over dinner, maybe also in a congressional office where you have someone with a large feedstock industry along with a farmer in the room talking to a congressman or congressman's staff, you realize that it's a really small world out there that we live in, right? That you would have the CEO of a very large company generating a lot of dollars, employing a lot of people, with a farmer, say, from Illinois, sitting down talking about an important issue that both of them upon which they're both dependent. So it's a small world, and in the fuel world, it's getting even smaller. And so you're able to see that it's a part of it at that board meeting. My three takeaways from that board meeting.
That's very interesting. Really glad you come and part of the Clean Fuel family now. And back to point one, as far as all the information there, it's like over your head. Well, a lot of times it's over my head too. So you're not the only one. And I work at Clean Fuels. It is, the information flow is robust to say
Tom,
the least.
you're like me in my other job when I was a lobbyist. Is I would tell people I'm not an expert in anything. I just have to know a little bit about everything in order to communicate it for the experts. So that's kind of the position that we're in. We're getting paid to communicate the high points, right, and the talking points.
Right, I do. We have a great team. They're the subject matter experts on the technical, sustainability, you name it. So, Stefan, I know you've been talking. Speaking of our team, Jeff Earl, our state regulatory director, who has a family that just is from Crockett County,
right
up the road.
Right up the road from our office here.
You've been talking to Jeff about some opportunities you see here in Tennessee as far as over in Nashville. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, I have been, and Jeff has been a fantastic resource. Y'all are, it's great to have him on staff. Great resource. Our legislature has had an interest in energy promotion in Tennessee. So what am I talking about? We're not Texas. We're not Nebraska or some of these other states where energy is being produced. However, we have a great amount of transportation that flows through the state of Tennessee. And that's not only ground transportation, but we have the Tennessee River, we have the Mississippi River that flows in and by Tennessee. And then we have a few large airports. The Nashville Airport is just growing consistently all the time, as well as the Memphis International Airport, which is the home of FedEx. So from that standpoint, we have a lot of energy needs in Tennessee. But what their question is where can we become a part of the energy production? And it is an open-ended question that some may even laugh at from the standpoint of we're not an oil-rich state. We do have some natural gas in the state that could be accessed through fracking, and some oil that can be accessed through other means. It's just not the market is not there for it, but we have been in the past. So when they asked that question, and most specifically the Senate Energy, Agriculture, and Natural Resources Committee and the House Agricultural and Natural Resources Committee, which is a committee of jurisdiction over energy within the state, they asked the question, okay, Stefan, what about biofuels? And I immediately turned to Jeff to answer some of those questions. And so he presented in front of the House committee, the full committee last year, very well received. And will anything change here? Well, what, where will that go? I don't know, but we got the conversation started. And the conversation started with a representative from Clean Fuels Alliance America. Now, since that time, there have been some other organizations, specifically our Tennessee Chamber of Commerce, our Tennessee Fuel and Convenience Store Association have now talked with Jeff, and I think he has presented at some of their association meetings. So what has that done? Number one is it has, I guess, exposed Tennessee decision makers and influencers to Clean Fuels Alliance America. And at the same time, what it did was expose those entities and those decision makers to the fact that Tennessee soybean producers are one of the mainstays within the organization. Yeah. And so that's worked out considerably well. Now, where that's going to go, I don't know. But again, we just started the conversation. The conversation's going really, really well.
Well, you bring up a good point about how Tennessee is such a transportation hub with FedEx being located in Memphis. I know the aviation industry is looking to use more sustainable aviation fuel. I think you've talked about with Jeff, your inland waterways, there's more and more interest in using biodiesel in inland barges.
Right.
It is being used. They want to use more. And you got, I think, Pilot, Flying J's, the Pilot used to be?
Yes, it's headquartered here in Tennessee.
Tennessee. So, yeah, a lot of conversions here in this state. I think
Ingram Barge.
Ingram Barge, that's like one of the biggest in the country.
The largest in the country is also headquartered in Nashville. Yep.
I didn't know they were in Nashville. We need to go talk to them.
Was with one of their reps at a little event through Waterways Council just this week down in Chattanooga. And that would be great to have a conversation with them as well. But go back, just like I said, Tennessee fits in the transportation sector, and that's the reason that our state legislature was asking the question, what are our options of producing fuel here in the state? So.
Well, yeah, I think there's lots of opportunities, and we are so lucky to have the relationship with Tennessee Soybean Promotion Board Council and you, Stefan, with all your connections from Nashville and the state. I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities here. And here, let me throw another fun fact at you about Jeff Earl. His mom grew up Crockett County, but his dad was a Nashville songwriter, had a #1 hit in the 70s called Teddy Bear.
Really?
I did not
know that about Jeff, right?
Yeah, he was, his dad went to Nashville and hit it, at least for a while, pretty big.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's a lot of creativity in Nashville, Tennessee, and from a songwriting standpoint as well as performer standpoint, it's a wonderful place. And it sounds like his dad kind of caught the Nashville dream by going up there and hitting it to the big time. So
he got covered by I think Willie Nelson, Waylon Jennings. So pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's the Tennessee story.
Yeah, and so we were talking earlier, Stefan, about another project that Tennessee Soybean Promotion Council is supporting. And at first I was wondering, well, what does this have to do with us? And then it's like, oh, it has everything to do with us. So why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah. The initiative is called Be Pro, Be Proud. It is in several states. And about 3 years ago, Tennessee became a part of this national initiative. So Be Pro, Be Proud is an initiative to try to drive high school students into career and technical jobs or career and technical higher education. Now, how do they accomplish that is the question. One of the main ways in which they've done that is they have built out a truck and trailer, and it has, as you would say, all the bells and whistles. It's an extremely extravagant truck and trailer that will travel around to high schools throughout the school year. And students can walk through the trailer, which will expands out and expands the square footage in it. And within that trailer are interactive videos. There are simulators of all types, and I'll give some examples. Welding simulators. There is excavator simulators. We have a tractor simulator in there. The Trucking Association provided a trucking simulator and all these simulators are used for training in a career and technical center. And so those are some examples of what you would see walking through the truck. And as the students are leaving, they're able to identify what areas of career and technical work they would like to know more about, and they enter their information. And what that does is allow our state Board of Regents system to start recruiting those students into career and technical education if they want to go on to a school. What it also does is when they're in a local community, and let's say, for example, there's welding shops or excavators, farmers, or maybe farm equipment dealerships in that area, they can bring by their contact information or any brochures, job applications or anything else, and lay them there on a table. So as those students are leaving that truck, they're able to find job opportunity contacts. The truck, there were over 11,000 students that went through the truck last year, and it was only operational for a half of the year after it was debuted. And they expect to reach over 30,000 this year. And Tennessee Soybean was a part of the sponsorship. We have a simulator there. But going back to what you were saying earlier, every career opportunity that they expose students to in there is used by the farm community. It is used by the energy community. I could go, if there is a soybean crusher plant in Tennessee, they will need every job that is exposed there in that plant, not only to build it, but to keep it up and operational. So we think it's a great program. We're proud to be a sponsor of it. beprobeproud.com.
Well, that's a fantastic program. Once you explain it to, I totally understand why the Tennessee Soybean Promotion Council want to support it. And, it relates to our industry. It's like I was telling you, the biodiesel plant managers I talked to, their number one problem is always finding good help. There's a shortage of welders, diesel mechanics, truck drivers. So absolutely, we all need them. And so
we do. We
applaud the vision of the soybean farmers, farmer leaders to support something like that.
It's the, I love the quote from Mike Rowe of Dirty Jobs when he said, we spend so much time training students to try to get the job in the corner office, we forgot to train students to build the corner office. And that's where we are now today in career and technical jobs. And we believe this initiative will help turn that tide.
Yeah, absolutely. Been great visiting with you, Stefan. I definitely, I want to give a shout out to Carl Schultz, your representative of Tennessee Soybean Board. And he's a very enthusiastic farmer representative to the Clean Fuels. We really love to have him on, part of the board. And thank you for sending that. And looking forward to working with you and Tennessee Soybean Promotion Council more in the future.
Well, Tom, same here. We appreciate all that you do.
All right. Thank you, Tom and Stefan. That's it for this week's episode. If you enjoy the show and you've got a moment and can give us a rating, we do appreciate it. It helps the show grow and get higher up on the lists. And if you really want to go for it, just leave us a review. We might just read it here. So please do that wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you've got a question for our experts or a suggestion for a future topic or guest, you can email us at podcasts@cleanfuels.org. And join us next week for another episode of the Better, Cleaner, Now podcast.
Thanks for listening. Better, Cleaner, Now is a production of Clean Fuels Alliance America. Follow us at cleanfuels.org and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. For more information on Clean Fuels Alliance America, visit us at cleanfuels.org.